All right, so let's get right back into it here. And I wanted to start talking more about the conjugate method by explaining to you a little bit more about what it's not. See, the conjugate method, especially when you look at the most popular conjugate method out there, the one that's been written about the most, which is the Westside method that's used at Westside Barbell, or you can't even say that anymore because it has evolved and it has changed so much over the years. We want to start talking a little bit about what it's not, because there are some preconceived notions about the conjugate method. And when you mention the conjugate method, especially to coaches, they automatically assume certain things that just are not true. So the first thing everyone assumes is that the conjugate method is Westside Barbell. Okay, Westside Barbell and the Westside method that was written about a lot back in the mid to late 2000s, 2004 to like 2007, 2008 are when a lot of the articles come up that talk about certain percentages and talk about max effort days and sled dragging and all that stuff. That is a lot different from what they do today. So yes, the Westside method is a conjugate method, but not all conjugate methods are Westside. We explained that in the last video. Conjugate method is not only bands and chains. So when people think conjugate method, they think, oh, bands and chains, we don't have those at our school, so we can't do the conjugate method. That's wrong. The conjugate method is just not the equipment that is used. You can do an entire conjugate training block. You can do an entire in-season and off-season training program without using bands or chains. So you can. It's not just about what equipment that you have. Also, it's not just sled dragging. Some people think Westside Barbell, oh, we're just going to, drag sleds all day long, or, conjugate method is going to be just like the Westside method, and, they always talk about dragging sleds, and we can't do that, and that doesn't do anything for us. And all right, I totally get that, but that's not what that's all about. Same thing. The conjugate method is not just for geared powerlifting. It's not just for powerlifting. You can use the conjugate method in many, many, many successful collegiate programs, post-collegiate programs, gyms out there that work with Olympic athletes and pro athletes use the conjugate method, and it has nothing to do with powerlifting. It's not just hitting a 1 rep max every single day. People think the conjugate method is just, okay, we're going to go in the gym, we're going to blast our faces off and break a bunch of blood vessels, and we're going to go absolutely crazy at the risk of getting hurt and injured. We're just going to hit a new 1 rep max every day. That could not be further from the truth. People also think that the conjugate method is anti-weightlifting and anti-Olympic lifting. That, again, could not be further from the truth. What we're going to see with the conjugate method is that you can manipulate the method and you can tweak and adjust exercises based on the weaknesses of the athletes. And if you want your athletes to use things like the clean and press or the clean and jerk or push presses or behind the neck jerks or snatches or whatever it might be, you can use the Olympic lifts and their variations in conjugate training. The other thing is that the conjugate method is not just box squats. A lot of people think conjugate method, box squats, that they go hand in hand. You can do, again, just like with bands and chains, you can do an entire block of training in the conjugate method and not do a box squat once. So these are just some things that people think of when they think, okay, conjugate method, we're going to be doing box squats with bands and chains, then we're going to be, pulling sleds back and forth. We're going to be going super, super heavy to a 1 rep max every single day, and this is really just made for power lifters. That could not be further from the truth. The conjugate method, as we're going to see, is going to be easily adjustable, easily tweaked, and easily manipulated to fit your athletes and to fit your team and your season. All right, so now that we've covered what the conjugate method is not, let's start talking a little bit more about what the conjugate method actually is. So like we said in the last video, the conjugate method is not a program. It's not a percentage-based program where you do a specific exercise on a specific day for a specific amount of sets and repetitions at a specific percentage of your 1 rep max. There are a lot of programs out there, but this is not a program. I don't want you to think of this like a cookie cutter program. I want you to think of this as a method. So think of the conjugate method as a system. It's a skeleton. It's a backbone. Okay, it is something that you can follow, but you can easily manipulate and tweak to work around weaknesses of your athletes. So if you have a brand new beginner thrower who has never lifted a weight in her life, something like a body weight squat for 10 reps or a squat for 10 reps holding a 20-pound dumbbell might be extremely difficult. That might be a very tough exercise for her to do. Where then you compare that freshman girl to your senior guy that squats well over 400 pounds, doing something like 350 pounds for 2 or 3 reps might be difficult for that senior, that freaky strong senior. Now, both of those athletes are getting a very difficult, a very high intensity workout, but doing 2 completely different exercises, different sets, different reps, because they're 2 different people. You cannot just take a cookie cutter program and apply it to both of those athletes, because neither one of them is really going to see a benefit. The other thing that when you research the conjugate method online, you see that typically it is broken up into a 4-day split. So right now is when a lot of you want to actually just click the red X and get out of the screen and stop watching, because you're automatically saying, hey, look, we're a high school, we're a college, we don't have the ability to get in the weight room 4 days a week. We don't have the ability to, get as much work done as we want to. The regular coaches have the kids 3-4 days a week. There are track meets during the week. There are track meets on the weekend. There's no way we're going to get in the weight room 4 days a week like a typical conjugate method would ask us to do. No problem. We're going to go ahead and explain how we can do that in future videos using the video from Chad Wesley Smith and Dr. Mike Israetel that talked about the conjugate method and kind of applied their principles to that. That's going to be in the next couple of videos. The other thing is, a lot of people know the conjugate method as kind of by 3 different days, 3 different methods that are within the conjugate system. The first is the max effort method. Typically, you're going to see 2 max effort days throughout the week. Those are normally earlier in the week. One is going to be a max effort lower body day. The other is going to be a max effort upper body day. You also have your dynamic effort method. So there are typically two dynamic effort days. The first day is going to be a dynamic or an explosive lower body day. The second is going to be a dynamic or an explosive upper body day. And then blended in with the dynamic and the max effort movements are going to be the repetition method. So the repetition method, or the repetition effort method, that is where, as a high school track and field coach, or as a sort of beginner collegiate or a lower level collegiate coach, this is where we are going to work on hypertrophy. So this is where we're going to work on muscle size, actually increasing the cross-sectional size of the muscle fibers. So why is this a good thing? Well, increased muscle, the larger the muscle is, the stronger the muscle is going to become. But this is also great for your high school athletes because they don't have a lot of experience in the weight room. You're not going to get a high school freshman or sophomore that's going to have 3 or 4 years of training in a weight room under their belt. Quite the opposite. This might be the first time they are ever seeing a weight room or spending a good amount of time in the weight room. So this is where you're going to be practicing the movements. You're going to be doing moderate weight for higher repetitions. We're looking at sort of a moderate weight for anywhere in that 12 to 20 rep range. And we're going to be working on practicing the movements while building the muscle and gaining muscle size. So that's really the gist of a conjugate program. So you can see what's not in there. We don't have chains, we don't have box squats, we don't have bands or sleds. We really just have a skeleton. We really just have a system that you can follow along. Now, the biggest hurdle, the biggest obstacle that we are going to have to overcome is going to be 2 things, especially for the high school coaches and strength coaches that are watching this video. Number 1, how do you take 4 days of training and put that into maybe 2 days of training in the weight room? And number 2 is that you have all these different kids that are all different levels, all different strengths. How do you set this up so that you are actually able to give each individual athlete what they need to make sure that they are all getting stronger, to make sure they are all getting better, but also to make sure that you are pushing them hard enough without going too easy and doing it at certain times during the season. We are going to cover all of that in future videos. Today, I wanted to just get out there what the conjugate method is, what the conjugate method is not, to get really some of the pre-existing notions of what the conjugate method is out of your head. So if you're thinking the conjugate method is just box squats, bands, and chains, hopefully now you understand it really has nothing to do with that. It's not about the exercises. It's not about the gym that does it. It's really about taking the method and being able to manipulate the method to make it your own. And that's what we're going to go over in future videos. Again, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. We are going to take this one small bite at a time. The joke last week was, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. The conjugate method really is like eating an elephant. We're going to take things slow. We're going to break things down so that you understand them. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, we're going to start looking more into how to take the conjugate method, how to break that down so that it fits into a 2-day-a-week split that you can use with your throwers and your jumpers and your sprinters to make sure they are getting stronger and more explosive and peaking correctly for the end of the year.